real leadership. This revolutionary sort of movement which erupted inside of Lebanon, this massive protest movement, hundreds of thousands of people packing the streets, clashes with security forces, etc. It had no clear leadership. So of course, in the absence of clear leadership, the United States, through, for instance, the National Endowment for Democracy, was very much implicated in many of the things which were going on, the more violent elements which were going on during the demonstrations which occurred inside of Lebanon. But not only that, the media campaign which was stirring up and whipping up hatred against Hezbollah at that time. And of course, until this day, we still have the media whipping up this hysteria. Now, without going too much into specifics about the hysteria whipped up inside of Lebanon, and of course, this is distributed to the world, the propaganda which was produced by the United States, from the United States, against Hezbollah. Also, I want to focus on one key example which happened very recently, and that's the claims made by Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli premier, at the United Nations, where he stated that he knew where Hezbollah missiles were kept. And take a look at this video, and then I'm going to give you a rundown of what happened afterwards. And this is very key to understanding this sort of propaganda, and just how outrageous it is.
So I want to show you the entrance to Hezbollah's missile factory, because that's what it is. It's right here. This is the gas company, and this is the missile explosive depot. I say to the people of Janach, you've got to act now. You've got to protest this. Because if this thing explodes, it's another tragedy. I say to the people of Lebanon, Israel means you no harm, but Iran does. Iran and Hezbollah have deliberately put you and your families in grave danger. And what you should make clear is what they have done is unacceptable. You should tell them, tear these depots down.
Now, just hours after this, these claims were made by Benjamin Netanyahu. He claimed in front of the world at the United Nations that this was definitely a site where Hezbollah missiles were being kept. What then happened is that the leader of Hezbollah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, delivered a speech in which, I caught this speech live actually, in which he said that he would openly allow the media, any media group, anyone that wanted to come, to film this area, to investigate this area that Netanyahu claims Hezbollah had missiles stored in. And this happened that night. People came in. You're seeing some of this on screen now of the media packing into this area. This was a tour organized by Hezbollah. And Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, during his speech, when he organized this, actually, he checked the time during the speech, and it was around roughly 8:45 at the time. He looked over and asked for the time. And he openly said, well, look, there's no way we could have moved anything in this amount of time. And you can keep eyes on this spot for as long as you want. There's no way we're going to be able to move things. The eyes are on it now. And he invited everyone in, and it was absolutely embarrassing to Israel. And it shows that either Israel has terrible intelligence, or that Netanyahu just made this whole thing up in order to paint Hezbollah as this rogue group of bloodthirsty militants who would keep weapons in a densely populated civilian area. And so when we're hearing different claims about Hezbollah and their weapons and all the rest of this, this is an example that I believe needs to be referred to, in that these claims of Hezbollah weapons being here and there and the rest of it, if anyone has claims, they have to be independently verified, because this was shown up, and this was something that Israel was so brazen to bring it to the United Nations in front of the entire world, to put it up with, visual aids, as Netanyahu does with his little, laser pointer, present this to the world. and it just be completely and utterly false. And we're not talking about, a tour of an area where, for instance, let's say, for instance, Israel set up a tour of the West Bank for politicians to come in or for the media to come in and not see anything bad happen. No, we're talking about a specific warehouse where the media was allowed to go in and investigate everything there, and investigate if it opened into anything deeper, whether there could have been missiles that were kept underneath. And of course, there was nothing stored there. So this is an example that I'd like people to refer back to. Now, another element is that there can be funding of groups inside of Lebanon to whip up hysteria and to basically launch offensives against Hezbollah. And this is something for people to keep their eyes on as well. For instance, Samir Jaja, who is one of the leaders of the Kataib Party, or otherwise known as the Phalangist Party, the militia which went in under the supervision of Israel and committed the massacre of Palestinians, thousands of Palestinians in Sabra and Shatila. And so this group, of course, having a massive past of massacres and all the rest of this, Samir Jaja in 2008, and this is of WikiLeaks documents which were released, was like one of the main contacts for the US intelligence, and basically begged them to bolster his militia in order and provide and supply his militia to combat Hezbollah and to fight Hezbollah back in 2008. And so that's something to keep eyes on. That's an example of something that can happen inside of Lebanon. And that, again, is due to, the sectarian nature of Lebanon. And right now, it's a very fragile situation. To round this video off, what I wanted to do was go into why Lebanon is a target. I've outlined a little bit about eliminating Hezbollah and how they would want to go about achieving this. So I believe the main objective here, of course, is to eliminate Hezbollah and their allies. And so whether that be economically, that be forcing the March 8 alliance to give up power, to remove the current president, and to remove basically Amal Hezbollah and Michel Aoun from any position of power inside of the country, and to completely economically strangle them in order to reduce them to next to nothing and make them irrelevant to Lebanese politics. But if that is not achieved, and they can't bring in an IMF-friendly, pro-US, pro-Israel leadership inside of Lebanon, and I guarantee you, it's not about reforms and it's not about helping the Lebanese people, because as soon as they get that, then, the whole thing will, they will allow wars to happen. For instance, if Israel wanted to go in, and we saw that in the past, and it never held up a helping hand to Lebanon to stop any of the catastrophes inflicted upon Lebanon in the past. As soon as they get that may be when it starts to stop and things return to some sort of normality. However, the Lebanese people, without the resistance there, are going to basically suffer a great deal. I guarantee that